Hello, and welcome to this edition of Roots Marriage Ministry Moments. My name is Dr. J.C. Matthews, and I'm here with my wife, Gina Matthews. And what we want to talk to you today about is a topic that is common sense, but at the same time, is something that we think people need to be reminded of. And that topic is the importance of dating your spouse. The importance of dating your spouse. One of the things that I notice when you start to see issues in a relationship, and you boil it down to where what the root cause is, generally you can tie it back to a place where there has been a discontinuance in some form or fashion of the dating process, and life just becomes humdrum. It becomes business. It's filled with all types of challenges. And what happens is I don't think it's a conscious thing. Right. I think it's just a result of just life happening and taking the eye off of that which is foundational to what actually built the relationship. And so what we want to do today is just give some insights into that process, maybe identify some problems. And then at the end, we want to talk about how to revive a marriage. If it's dying on the vine, or for whatever reason, it is not what the couples expect, or it's not healthy. And so what we want to do is we want to, first of all, put out the reminder that it is necessary to date your spouse.
Yes, it is.
So I'm going to ask my wife just a couple questions, and then we'll get into the message. When we were dating, and I want you to take notes as well, because these are things that you can communicate with your spouse as well. And by her answers, you can kind of determine whether or not this ongoing process of dating is still taking place. When we were dating, what is it that you most enjoyed about our relationship?
The time to be able to talk with you without interference.
Okay. Now, that was a pretty difficult challenge for me, because when we were dating, of course, we were in college. We both had our different schedules. We actually went to different schools in a different state. So it wasn't like we were literally around the corner where I can catch a bus there. So it was something that took a lot of effort. And on top of that, I was playing college basketball. So most of my free time was taken up. I didn't have any free time. Once classes were done, we were either working out, watching films, we were actually or in practice or en route to a game and coming back. So it was something that had to be very intentional. And I made it a point that when I did have that free time, that I did want it to be our time. I didn't want it to be her having to come over to campus and be around all the rest of the players, and then us kind of try to connect in that type of environment. And so I recognized that was something that you really enjoyed and desired, because you actually articulated that to me later on, that when I was finished playing basketball collegiately, I would find ways or find gyms that were open to go work out.
Yeah, basketball was a big thing.
And so, even though I wasn't playing collegiately, I still wanted to be competitive. And so I would find different places to go work out. And oftentimes, I would get back around 9 at night. And, it'd be very difficult at that time of night to really carry on a type of conversation. And plus, I did not want her to get the impression that basketball took priority over you. And so knowing that as we went into the marriage, that was something that I really wanted to try to maintain, was having that time with you and having a time where we could really just talk and really date. I mean, finding time to go out and to have dates and that sort of thing. So just based on that answer that my wife gave me, that she wanted, that was very important to her, and she articulated that to me later, that's something that I try to do now. A lot of times when we'll be just sitting around, or after I'm done studying, finishing a message or writing, I'll come in and I'll say, this is my baby's time, so she can tell me all about it. And, a lot of times we'll go out to eat. Maybe we'll go to have breakfast or brunch. And that's an opportunity for you to just tell me what's going on in your mind. And so those types of things I've recognized have been very important in maintaining the health of our relationship. But I want to share some things with you that kind of lay a foundation for what we're going to talk about. So dating is a process of watering your relationship, providing the essential elements and environment for a healthy relationship and harvest. And I put it at the actually end of here, but I want to mention it up front, is that marriage is a long distance race. It is not a sprint, which involves, because it's a long distance race, it involves preparation and investment in order for you to finish strong. And so, we see a lot of people that are excited about one another and they want to jump right in. And then there's been very little preparation and in some cases, very little dating.
Very much so. I think it's very important, talking about the dating process, using that time to really get to know the other person, using that time to get to see what type of character they have. And when that process doesn't take place or it's rushed, I think that causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, and the dating process, the reason why I suggest, if you're in that place right now where you're contemplating marriage, I think that you should have been dating for a minimum of 2 years. Because what you'll see in 2 years, generally there are some things that are happening, or you'll see priorities that are developing in a person's life. You'll have a chance to have some disagreements. The holidays will have passed and you'll have to figure out who's going to spend time where and how that's going to look.
It gives you time to really get to see who that person really is. Because when you date for a short amount of time and you're considering marriage in a short amount of time, you don't have time to deal with all those different issues that come up. You don't have time to see, you need to see the seasons of the year to see if the person is steady or if the person, depending on what's going on in life, changes.
Yeah, and I would say a couple of seasons.
Yeah, definitely.
Allow a cycle to go through and come back around, and it'll give you a real estimate of who it is that you're dealing with.
Yes.
And I think that that's a core problem once you actually get into marriage. If you didn't have that dating process before, an extended dating process before to get to know the person, you really don't know how to date in marriage.
Right.
Because you didn't date before.
Right.
And date even when things are not agreeable.
Right.
Date when things are not convenient. Date when things are going wrong. How do you continue to date and maintain a healthy relationship that's moving forward, where both people at the end of those cycles are still in a place where they're excited about one another in marriage?
I think that what you just said is so important, because during the really tough times in our marriage, those dates that we had where we took time to go off, even though financially we didn't really have the ability to do it, those times meant so much to me, to be able to spend time away from the situation that we were dealing with, and just be able to talk to each other and encourage each other. That was like one of the most important times for me. And
this was something that I was actually doing subconsciously, because it was nothing but the grace of God. Because it was interesting, when we were dating, we were poor.
Yes.
And so we had to be creative in finding ways to get away. But at the same time, it wasn't the amount that was being spent. Right. It was the time that we got to spend together and to really separate ourselves or disconnect ourselves from what was going on around us.
Right.
And I can tell you guys this, I really depended on those experiences to maintain a marriage when we were going through those very tough times at the beginning. You know, that's how I came up with the idea, well, let's go to a Starbucks in a nice neighborhood.
Right.
You know, it made us feel like we were more than our circumstances. We got to see people that were prospering, be around in an environment where things were happening. And it made me feel like it made me feel like, and my hope was that it made you feel like that there is a better way that is available that we just need to work towards. And we would talk about the future at those particular meetings at a Starbucks. So this date cost about $10. We would sit down, slowly drink our coffee and talk. And then once we were done, we would go back to our situation. But we have been refreshed.
Right.
You know, that was a time what we're going to talk about as watering the relationship. And so there are three main kinds of watering. If you could list those, baby.
The three kinds of watering are emotional watering, physical watering, and spiritual watering.
So when you're talking about watering, a lot of people, and I try to clarify this when we were talking about watering in the past, but definitely here, that watering is just not buying somebody's stuff.
Right.
Or having kind words. Watering is providing what is necessary for the health of what's being watered. So it would depend on, even in a gardener would know this, that watering, how much water will depend on the kind of plant that you're dealing with.
Exactly.
You know,
I was just thinking the same thing.
If you water a cactus like you're trying to water a rose, the cactus is going to die because it requires so much more water. But at the same time, a rose may not require as much water. It may require, a different type of environment. So you have to, and that's why dating prior to is so important, because you get to know the kind of wife or the kind of husband that you have and what their needs are. And so when we're talking about watering, we're talking about emotional watering, physical watering, and spiritual watering. So when I say emotional watering, I'm more specifically talking about the type of support, encouragement, and mutual development of a person's internal state. How do they perceive themselves, especially like after having children or having gone through some traumatic transitions in life. That affects the way a person sees themselves, sees you, and sees the world. So I recognize that like I was talking about, going to Starbucks was really a way to emotionally encourage and strengthen you, while at the same time it did the same thing for me.
Yeah.
So I recognize that actually would affect all the other areas, how a person thinks.
I think it's really important. You were talking about like after a woman has a child, different situations like that, or a situation where some trauma has taken place. Those times are so critical in a marriage. I've seen a lot of marriages fail during those time periods because the other person wasn't able to do that. They were either focused on themselves or whatever the situation, not able to water a person in a critical time period when you're dealing with something that you've just gone through is very important.
Yeah, and the manner in which you emotionally water a person is important too, because depending on why that person is suffering emotionally or there's a deficit emotionally, you have to be sensitive on how that watering takes place. If you are the cause of why this person is emotionally not where they need to be, your approach has to involve more wisdom. in the sense that you don't want to overstep or be a presumptuous concerning how that person feels or the level of pain that they're feeling. But at the same time, you have to be committed to the work of restoring that person in a way that means that is meaningful to them. And so, it may just be spending quiet time with them, or watching movies with them, or being very complimentary concerning their appearance or their value or what they bring to the household can be very, very important. Because talking about emotional watering, I mean, there's such a wide variety in reasons why that takes place. But I just think that it needs to be done with wisdom, and that requires you knowing your spouse.
Yes.
That's why, again, the dating beforehand,
To get to know them.
you've seen them in a good state. So you know that the picture that you have of them prior is not what it looks like now, emotionally, not physically, emotionally. So you know what that person looks like happy, or that person looks like being excited about the relationship. And we're going to talk about at the very end how to get that back. But that's why that dating process is so important earlier on. But if you have not had that dating process, you're in the process of educating yourself, of learning.
Right.
And learning is oftentimes a slow process. It's not something that's going to take place overnight. So you have to be aware that there's a level of watering that needs to take place that deals with the psychological element or the emotional element of the person. The second one is physical watering. Now, I call physical watering is meeting the natural needs of a person. And if there's a lack of physical watering, it can result in emotional problems. For instance, if there's not a lot of intimacy in the relationship, not only just sexually, but just touching and tenderness and care and demonstrations of love, words of confirmation, those things, although the words of confirmation are not physical, but if there's a separation in contact, physical contact is a part of building a relationship. And so, I always try to, when we're counseling people, I always try to encourage them, get in the habit of holding hands.
Right.
Or hugging one another or embracing one another.
It amazes me how many people don't have physical contact outside of having sexual contact. And I'm like, how do you even maintain that type of relationship?
And that's dangerous, because it will build the understanding that the marriage relationship in some level is based on sex.
Right.
That as long as we're having sex, then the marriage is okay. And that's warped.
Yes, it is.
Because even that act, if the person is not emotionally healthy or there, can communicate something totally different to your partner. And so physical contact, I mean, a lot of people, especially once you've been in a relationship for some period of time, and you've been in a relationship for years, what you start to notice is, the doors stop being open. People don't hold hands. If they're sitting next to one another, or
They don't touch,
or they're sitting so far away. Now, the only reason why we're sitting so far away is just for distancing, spacing for the broadcast. But that's something that I enjoy, is being in your presence. I like to feel your presence. And so in any way that I can, I'll be sitting at dinner, or we'll be watching a movie or whatever, and I'll just reach over and put my hand, even if it's just touching her, because I want her to not only discern that I'm physically there, but I'm emotionally and physically there, that there's a connection. And so a lot of people underestimate the need for those small instances or opportunities for touching. Now you don't, we don't advise you to act out like you guys need to go get a room in,
Right.
in public. But there, I think, and also that communicates to others that the relationship is healthy. Other people watch you. If
Yes,
you
they
don't,
do.
if you don't know, there are people that are either single or unhappy in their marriage or relationship that always thinks the grass is greener on the other side, and they're looking for opportunities. Now
Right.
these people may be just downright bad people, or they just maybe people that's in pain, and they're looking for some level of release or escape, and they see it in your spouse. Now that's a twisted mindset, but I've seen it. I've seen it where people pick up on certain hints and indications that there's a problem simply because of the lack of intimacy or
Right.
physical contact between a spouse. And the Bible says that don't give the devil place.
That's right.
We need to be aware of his devices. We should not be ignorant of his devices. And one of his devices is the cause of separation.
Right.
Not only emotionally, but physically, that causes the other person to be vulnerable in a certain respect.
Yeah, it's very important to remember each spouse may have different ways of how they receive that watering, but you have to learn what it is for your spouse, because like you said, people are always watching, looking for opportunities, even whether they're in pain or they're just wrong, they're looking. So we can't give them the opportunity. And when people see something that's healthy, they see no opening.
Yeah, and so think about this, and I want to speak to those who have been married for some period of time, or even those that just got married. Do you still kiss your spouse?
All right.
I mean, just when you're leaving the house, do you search the person out to give them a kiss or a hug? Think about it. That may be the last time you see the person. Not being negative, but the truth is, I think about those kind of things. Here I am going out into the world in a lot of moving parts and things
Right.
happening.
Right.
I don't want to have had something happen and I'm laying somewhere thinking I didn't even get to kiss my wife or to tell her that I love her or hold her. And so, I think like that. I try to always, if I'm in the house, find my wife and kiss her or hug her or tell her, baby, I'm leaving, I love you, to just practice that emotional support.
Right.
Like I said, if I can, I'm gonna get a kiss and a hug. And so just think about it. Are those things still taking place? Do you open the door for your spouse? When you guys are walking along in public, do you hold hands or do you still hold hands? Or did you ever hold hands? Those are things that you can start to do now that don't cost
Right.
you no money.
That's right.
It just requires being conscious that a relationship needs watering, and the element of that is physical watering. And most definitely, as the Bible says, don't deny yourself, deny your partner of yourself without consent.
That's right.
That is emotional abuse. That is abuse on a lot of different levels. You cause that person as well as yourself to become prime
A
target
Yes.
for the enemy. And so, God created that relationship and that type of intimacy for a reason. It is a bond that is not only created on the marriage night, but it is a reoccurring bond that should take place regularly, not just on somebody's birthday.
Exactly.
It should be regular, so that you guys are growing together. You're learning one another together. There is not only a physical bond that is being made, but a spiritual one, and that's actually the next level of watering
Yeah.
is spiritual. Because marriage is just as much a spiritual reality than it is a physical one. So when you guys came together and you had the event of marriage, that was a physical event that had spiritual ramifications.
That's right.
That in the eyes of heaven and the eyes of God, there was a union that took place spiritually where now you're one. And so I think a lot of people develop mental issues because of there is a spiritual element to marriage that when those other areas are neglected, a person's spirit becomes damaged.
Another thing that is an issue that affects this watering is when people do things that you should only do when you're married, when you're not married, it impacts the marriage.
Yeah, that's something that we talked about before when we were talking about soul ties in a previous teaching. So if you have the opportunity, view that teaching as well. But you do have to recognize that there is a spiritual element to the marriage or relationship that can impact your mind, can impact your emotions, and can impact your physical well-being.
Right.
A lot of people have physical manifestations because of spiritual issues. And this is a really good point, and it's not listed, but the Lord showed me this, that this is why the man has to be a covering for his wife. There has to be a covering, and the wife, in a real sense, covers the husband. Because the Bible talks about one could put 1,000 to flight, two can put 10,000 to flight. And we understand that a marriage is between a husband, a wife, and God. And the threefold cord is not easily broken. And so when you have those elements in harmony with one another, it's a defense.
Yes, it is.
Not only in a physical way, but in a spiritual way. You know, spirits recognize where there's a covenant. You know, there's something powerful about you. You get a spouse or a husband or a wife that will come into agreement with you about something, no matter what the situation is, and you guys come together and you do things decently and in order, and you're headed in the right direction. There are very few things that will keep you from achieving what it is that you guys have set out to do.
That's right.
And so you have to recognize that there has to be a spiritual watering. And I'm going to say this, that there has to be regular spiritual feeding.
Yes.
You know, the husband primarily has to become a priest in his home. He has to be one who is making sure that there is a spiritual element to their relationship. Or else naturally things will come up that will be indicators that maybe you should go in another direction. I believe that that is a result of a void, a spiritual void. Do you guys have a church home? Do you go to the same church? I mean, there's a lot I've seen situations where husband and wives go to separate churches.
That's right.
And unless those places are teaching the exact same thing, if that's the case, then why can't there be a compromise? If it's teaching the exact same thing, a compromise, then we as a family go one place or another. The reason why there's a separation, generally, they're not teaching the same thing.
Right.
One person is inclined or oriented towards one spiritual diet and another towards another spiritual diet. So you have spiritual division,
Right.
even within the home, that the enemy can use. And so, that's an element that's often overlooked. You want to be watered from one place. You don't want
For
different
one
people
household.
watering the household.
Right.
And that's why I believe that there has to be some consensus on, if the people are not of the same religion, or if a person is not a believer at all, before you get married, there needs to be some consensus, some unity. The Bible warns you against that.
Exactly. That's why the Bible warns about not being unequally yoked.
Yeah.